As we showed in the previous video, Clement Mihalescu implies that the services offered by the bootcamp he attended cost a total of $50,000 to secure a job with a large company. What we mean is that, for any bootcamp, students will find employment tailored to the services they subscribe to and the total amount of money contributed to the bootcamp's accounts. If a student only pays the initial $15,000 course fee, they will only be able to find jobs paying $50,000 a year or even less, possibly part-time positions with low responsibilities. If the student pays for additional services, they will find better jobs because these services include fabrications in their profiles and resumes. However, the more they pay and the more expensive the service, the more that money is used to make these lies believable, such as including a degree from a university that doesn't exist in a country like India and jobs at a company that doesn't exist in a country like Morocco. When these candidates undergo background checks, everything is approved, and the State Department grants the required visa, despite laws prohibiting the hiring of individuals who lie on federal documents to the US government. We remind you that in many cases, even if the company is private, some include clauses in the employment contract stating that lying about technical background, education, and work experience is a federal crime, regardless of whether the position is within or outside the United States. What's astonishing is how many people do this every day and sign contracts even though these clauses are in their contracts. Why? As we mentioned in the previous video, this 4-month course is truly worthless, and the preparation these unsuspecting students receive after paying such a large sum of money is practically non-existent. They could have obtained the same level of preparation for free by accessing Udemy or Coursera. However, generating resumes for each student, precisely matching the exact qualifications of each company, is far more criminal. This service is completely pre-scripted. All they do is swap one candidate's name with another's. They then instruct each candidate on what to include in their LinkedIn profiles, create user accounts on job search platforms, and complete the entire application process using the keywords that each company's AI is searching for. Since a regular candidate doesn't know what questions the AI is asking or what it's looking for, they are much more likely to be rejected, even if they exceptionally meet all the requirements for the position. Let's look at the following example for a front-end position. Knowledge of technologies like React, Angular, JavaScript, or TypeScript is very likely required. However, even though the job description doesn't explicitly mention Java, Python, or Haskell, artificial intelligence might be looking for the repetition of those words, both in the resume and in the application the candidate has created. This makes it very easy for bootcamps to place their students above any real engineer who doesn't pay for these services. In other words, all recruitment processes have hidden terms and secret codes known only to bootcamp agents. This way, they ensure their candidates are the only ones considered. Once the process begins, the candidate is given exercises for personal practice that perfectly match the questions they will be asked in each interview. Candidates are told what to answer and how to answer it, what code to run and how to write it, regardless of whether they actually know how to run it or why they're doing so. Once candidates complete all the interviews, recordings of each interview are made, barely justifying the hiring. Each recruiter submits a report to the hiring committee, and if the committee wants to audit the process, it can verify that at least the minimum requirements for the position are met. However, the hiring committee almost never questions the recruiter's report, so the only thing they scrutinize is how many other people were invited to the same process and rejected. This is why it's so important to continue with the statistics we discussed in the previous video. For every bootcamp student admitted, they must find at least 100 perfectly qualified candidates, whom they reject despite their flawless interviews. Each interview is one of 100, 200, 300, or even 1,000 interviews that a company like Company M, Big Smile, or Company G conducts all month for a multitude of positions they absolutely must fill. So, if they call around 1,000 candidates, they expect approximately 10 of them to be hired, and recruiters who work with bootcamps expect at least 6 of those 10 to be bootcamp graduates. Of those 1,000 candidates, they are told not to worry because the positions are guaranteed for each of them. However, the company already expects that only 10 of those 1,000 will be hired. If 11, 12, 13, or even 7 are hired, the company's expectations are being met. However, if 20, 30, 40, or 50 are hired, the company begins to have doubts and may start randomly auditing each of the hired individuals. Since these people are not 100% at the level required for the position, unlike the other people who are being rejected, there is a risk that the hiring committee will overturn the entire process or fire the employees responsible. Therefore, it is necessary that for every person from a bootcamp hired by the company, at least 100 rejections for the same position be justified. However, recruiters don't always reach those numbers, so many times these recruiters look for candidates through the LinkedIn platform or repeat data and videos from previous interview sessions from the last year. That is, on their servers, the same person may appear in 2 processes within a period of 4 to 8 months, where the real interview was in January, but the server shows that there was also another interview in May, and both videos are identical. Recruiters contact a potential candidate and convince them to place them in senior or even higher ranking positions by promising high salaries and benefits. This prospective candidate naively believes they will be hired at any moment, because if the recruiter contacted them before they applied for the position, it must be because their profile is very valuable. However, what they don't know is that they were already rejected before they were even contacted for the first time. Therefore, this candidate's recruitment process is initiated much faster than anyone else's. Recruiters constantly emphasize that candidates must listen carefully to the interview suggestions because, as the recruiters themselves say, Essentially, the interview is the expert. They convince each candidate that when an interview corrects them or points something out, it's because the candidate is genuinely doing something wrong and the interview wants to help. However, what candidates don't realize is that interviews often use this power to intentionally confuse them. They try to highlight points that are counterproductive to solving the problem or start lying, saying that certain functions or methods do things that aren't as they claim, in order to justify rejecting the candidate. If there are 3 or 5 interviews on the same day for the same candidate, one of them will take it upon themselves to generate their own negative report and then modify the other reports from their colleagues on the server, indicating negative things, without the other interviewers knowing. That's why a candidate might have one difficult interview and 4 extraordinarily great ones where they are welcome to the company, but a couple of days later the recruiter, who already knew that this person was supposed to be rejected even before the interviews took place, proceeds to give the candidate the bad news and put their name on a list, which helps with the statistics we mentioned at the beginning of this video. Since the candidate has no way to contact any of the interviews, their only contact with the company and the process is the recruiter. The recruiter's role is to suppress any complaints or negative comments about the process, and the only response is to tell the candidate it's best to keep quiet because otherwise no large company will ever hire them. They then advise the candidate to wait 6 months or a year before reapplying to keep their chances open. In other words, they coerce the candidate into accepting yet another injustice by threatening that the company will take any complaints about the process seriously and will not forgive them. This effectively blocks the candidate, preventing them from being contacted by any other recruiter from the same company for at least 6 months. Therefore, this candidate has been unfairly rejected and, at the same time, threatened because, behind the scenes, their name has been used to justify hiring someone who is completely unqualified for the position. We still need to explain all the implications of being included on each list and how the names and email addresses of each candidate are being used to justify hiring personnel from one state to another or from one country to another, creating serious problems with illegal immigration in the United States. To learn how this is happening in companies around the world, like this video, follow our channel, and watch our next video. This will also help more software engineers understand what's happening today.